to everyone who spent their morning on hold with Silvergate, trying to get their money out so that they can pay their employees and vendors. And it's a good reminder of why we're all here, trying to build protocols and better financial system that doesn't have hold music that you have to listen to, where you're not asked to write or sign a form with a wet signature and fax it in to get your money out. And you don't have to ask anyone, or you don't have to trust anyone that the funds are safe. And as we're building these new trustless protocols, we have an important question, which is, how are we actually going to govern them? Because one of the things we know is even as we're writing immutable smart contracts, things are going to change. The Ethereum itself has hard forked multiple times, and it's going to hard fork again. And so you have to have some plan in place for how you're going to upgrade the protocol, and that's where token governance comes into play. And so today I'm going to be talking about token governance and our journey at Origin and how we've handed over governance of our contracts to our community. And we've taken a bit of a familiar path here, starting from deployment with a single E of A wallet, transferring it over to a multi-sig, adding in a time lock in front so that people can feel comfortable knowing that, hey, if we do anything malicious, they can see what's happening, to moving to off-chain snapshot voting, where the community can vote on what they want, and then the multi-sig can actually execute those changes. And then finally, and we're very proud of this, moving to 100% full on-chain token governance. And we've gone through that entire life cycle. And so today what I'm going to be talking about specifically is the veToken model that was pioneered by Curve. We're going to talk about what it is, why it's awesome, and then how we can make it better. And for a quick introduction here, so Origin, you may know us, we've been around since 2017, and we have two big products that we're working on. We have Origin Story, which is our NFT platform. It's done multiple record-breaking NFT sales. And then we have Origin Dollar, which is a yield-bearing stablecoin. We're going to be talking mostly about Origin Dollar because that's a governance token that we launched for the on-chain. But let me give you a quick intro to Origin Story for those of you who are into NFTs and interested in that space. So we've done a lot of record-breaking sales, starting with Blau's sale that did $11.7 million and really ushered NFTs into the mainstream consciousness. From there, we worked with tons of other top NFT creators. Just in the EDM space, we worked with people like Bass Jackers, Kashmir, Don Diablo, Ryan Tedder from One Republic, Paris Hilton worked with us, SpaceX worked with us. And we're really proud of all the work we did to bring mainstream users into crypto and working with these partners that have millions and millions of people in their audiences and helping bring them into the space. We have an NFT marketplace that allows you to sell your own collection on your own domain under your own experience. A good example here is Pudgy Penguins and the marketplace that they have, where you can go to the Pudgy Penguin website. They get to control the look and feel, set their own terms on royalties and how they want to create this custom experience. So that's all I'm going to say about Origin Story, but if you're interested in learning more, you can go to story.xyz to learn more about that product. You can also come find me afterwards and we can chat about that. The other product we have at Origin is Origin Dollar, which is a yield-bearing stablecoin. There's about $60 million in circulation. It's currently earning about 5.5% APY. And how it works is this first stablecoin that earns a yield while it's in your wallet. So it's fully backed, 100% collateralized. You can redeem it at any time. Those funds that you hand into the protocol are deployed into yield earning strategies. So you can earn a yield without any of the hassle that's typically associated with yield farming. If you're a yield farmer, you're probably pretty familiar with the experience where you take your funds, put them in a farm, then you have to come back, harvest those rewards, take those rewards, swap them on Uniswap, then you take those stable coins, redeploy them back in the farm again, and you have to keep doing that over and over again to get faster compounding of your money, but you spend an absolute fortune in gas. With Origin Dollar, you just buy the token and watch the balance automatically go up right there in your wallet. And all of the costs of all of that harvesting and rewarding is done automatically. You don't have to do any other work. There's no staking, there's no lockups, you can come and go as you want. And of course, this has been audited by TrailerBits and OpenZeppelin, and it's the easiest way to get access to DeFi yields. Last year, we went through this process of breaking out a new governance token for Origin Dollar. So we have the $60 million that's in OUSD, and we needed a token to govern that. And so we have OGN, which is a governance token for our NFT platform. So last year we went through the process of breaking it out and launching this new token, which was airdropped to our OGN holders. And so people are able to stake their OGV for a portion of the fees that are generated by OUSD. And then these token holders are the ones who are actually making the really important decisions relating to the protocol. So questions like, what is the appropriate amount of risk for this protocol to take? Do we want to be aping into high-risk strategies? Do we want to be going and limiting ourselves to, battle-tested blue-chip protocols? How much should we be putting into Convex versus Aave? Token holders are ones who make those kind of really important decisions. So when we started building this out, first thing we looked at was Curve and their VE token model. VE stands for vote escrowed. And so it takes in Curve model, you take your tokens, you lock them up for anywhere from 1 week to 4 years to get VE, CRV in exchange. And what's really great about their model is that it transfers the voting and economic power to the people who are most invested in the long-term success of a protocol. 4 years in crypto is a really long time. It scares away all the people that you don't want governing your protocol. And so the way it works, the longer you lock up, the more rewards you get and the more governance power you have. And this model is incredibly, incredibly popular. You can see it's been copied by Frax, Balancer, DYDX, Yearn, Platypus Finance, StakeDAO, and the list goes on. There's this website, vemarketcap.com. I couldn't get it to load this morning, so I don't know if the site's down or whatever, but there's a site that has all the different protocols that have actually copied this VE token model. There's billions and billions and billions of dollars that are being secured by this voting mechanism today. But when we looked at all of those projects, what I saw was pretty much everyone copy-pasted the Curve contracts, which is actually a pretty good instinct, right? These are battle-tested protocols. We know it works. If it's not broken, don't fix it. There's a lot to be said for reusing code that we know works. But there have been only a couple attempts to improve these contracts. Frax made the alteration where you had to use a whitelist for a smart contract to be able to vote lock their tokens. For anyone who's followed the Curve Wars, you know why, right? Is they didn't want to be convexed, where Convex came, aggregated all of the voting power in their contracts, and so Frax said, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. Now, of course, last year, they partnered up with Convex, and so they've gone the complete opposite direction on that decision. We've also seen Yearn roll out the option to exit early for a penalty, and we've seen other projects that have copied that as well. But other than those few changes, we haven't seen a lot of innovation on the VE token model. So we started making a wish list of how we wanted to improve it, or things that we wanted in our governance system. First thing was we really wanted to use Solidity instead of Viper. Nothing against Viper, it's just our dev setup is all Solidity and it's easier to integrate. The Curve contracts are very verbose. There's a lot of code, not very gas efficient. And we said, hey, there's probably some optimizations here that we could make. One of the quirks about the way their voting decay works, or your voting power decays over time, it means that the sum of your transfer events is not equal to your voting power. And so that is a bit, it makes a lot of integrations a lot more complicated because you can't just check your wallet balance to see what your voting power is. Another thing is a bit just of an inconvenience. On Curve, you can only have one lock per wallet. It's really inconvenient. Like you have to send your funds to multiple different wallets if you want to do something like vesting. I want to lock a quarter of my tokens for 1 year, quarter of them for 2 years, etc. It's really painful to do that on Curve. One way, if you're asking people to lock their tokens for 4 years, you're going to have to give them some sort of incentive to do that. And so one thing that's very, very common here is to add rewards on top of this, in exchange for logging up for 4 years, here's what you're getting in exchange. And so with Curve, you have to do that in a separate, completely separate contract, a separate step. We thought it made sense. Let's just bundle that right into the same contracts, since this is going to be something that everyone is going to need in order to get people to lock up. And then finally, and this is the most difficult thing to implement with the Curve contracts, is voter delegation. And there's 2 use cases we really cared about. The first is, how do you actually get delegate to someone you trust? Voter participation in governance is very poor. One of the ways we can help improve that is just make it easier, right? Representative government, delegate your votes to other people you trust and let them vote on your behalf. And then the second thing is, what if you have millions and millions of dollars worth of a governance token, but you want to be voting every week in these proposals? It's a bit of a pain to do that from a multi-sig or a cold storage wallet, right? So it's very useful to be able to separate that out, where you keep all of your tokens in a safe place on a multi-sig, and then delegate your voting power to an EOA wallet in MetaMask, where you can be voting every single week. And all of these things were very hard to do on Curve's contracts. Like I said, the hardest one was delegation. And so to explain this, let me explain how Curve works. So you lock up for anywhere from 1 week to 4 years, and then you get VECRV, which is your voting power in exchange. But that voting power decays over the time of the duration of your lock. And it really makes sense. The idea is, on the last day of your lock, you shouldn't be able to vote in something terrible for the protocol and then run away and leave everyone else with the problem, right? So it makes a lot of sense for why you have to do this. If you want to vote again at the end of this, you have to recommit. You have to relock for more time, and then you can increase your voting power again. But we have 2 variables here. We have how many tokens you're locking. That's your this is your y-axis here. And then you have how many days you're locking for, which is your y-axis, right? And so you have a slope. So if we want to calculate the combined voting power, and in this case, we're thinking a delegation, right? So I want to take 2 people. We've got the blue voter, and we have the orange voter, and they both want to delegate their voting power to someone awesome like myself, right? So how do we actually sum this up? This is not very simple math, all right? There's no simple formula to explain this combined voting power and how it's decaying over time. And one of the most common use cases is calculating the percent ownership, right? What percentage voting power do you have out of all of the votes in existence? This is what that looks like, right? So maybe I can dust off some high school geometry math to figure this out, but this is not the easiest thing to do in Solidity. And that's just with 2 users. Let's try and do it with 4. So these are 4 users. They're all wanting to delegate their voting power. Again, the y-axis is how many tokens you're locking. Your x-axis is how long you're voting for. And that's what you end up with. That is your combined delegated voting power. That is not the kind of math you want to be doing in Solidity at all. So one of the engineers on our team, Daniel Von Fange, is a very well-known security researcher, asked a very interesting question. He said, why don't we just use an exponential decay function instead? So, okay. Well, why is that interesting? Well, now we don't need to worry about different slopes for different people. Each of these things is going to be decaying at a constant rate. So we can actually see what that looks like. So taking the same thing, except instead of using a linear decay, we're using an exponential decay. And then when we add them up, things get a lot simpler because they're decaying at a constant rate. We actually only have to update things on the blockchain whenever someone stakes or unstakes. We're not worrying about any other point in time. So this means we're no longer writing for loops. We're no longer iterating through all of these different checkpoints that you have in Curve. So only when people stake or unstake does anything need to change. Wow, look how much simpler that is, right? So the blue voter has 100% of the voting power. Then the orange voter comes in, vote locks, and then you can see blue's voting power drops and orange jumps up. This is way, way simpler for us to think about. So let's try it again with 4 users and see how it scales. Again, this is much, much better. We only have to worry about it when someone stakes or unstakes. This is a lot easier to code in Solidity. And so, again, your voting power it goes down if someone else stakes, and it goes up if someone else unstakes. Makes it really, really simple. So comparing the two models, on the linear decay, we have checkpoints, we have expensive for loops, and we have to write all of these different things on chain. On the exponential curve, there's no checkpoints, no for loops. We only have to write the time, the block, and how many points they have. Now, the next innovation that we realized we could add is using a concept from equity and how you issue shares as a company. So if you have a company and you have early stage investors, you give them all stock. And then Andreessen Horowitz comes along and wants to give you $20 million. You don't go to all of your old investors and say, hey, can I have some of his shares back? We want to give them some to Andreessen Horowitz. What do? You just print more shares, right? And everyone gets to keep the exact same number of shares that they had. But now your percent ownership of the network is smaller because there's more shares in existence. So this is the model that we used here. So new stakers get increasingly more tokens over time. And so the shares that the votes that you get to keep. But your percentage share of a network gets smaller and smaller as you get diluted by new people coming in. Does that make sense? All right, so again, just comparing the two different models. Number of votes decreases over time. And then one of the problems with Curve is that your balance, your voting, the number of VECRV you have, that's not what your voting power is. You actually have to go figure out where you are in that decay curve and do a bunch of math to figure out what your voting power is. On the exponential model, the number of tokens in your wallet is the number of votes you have. If you want to know what your percent voting power is, you just take the total number of VE OGV tokens in existence and then do the simple fraction, and that's your share of the voting power. So it's way, way easier. And then, of course, this means that it's compatible with OpenZeppelin's ERC20 snapshot. So it means you can very, very cost effectively, you can say, what is the voting power at this particular block? So this is really useful for governance, right? Because you want to be able to say, when this proposal was issued, who had how many votes at that point, right? You don't want someone to be able to buy a whole bunch of votes after the proposal is actually live. So again, we added multiple new features here. We added in delegation, which you really can't do in Curve without having crazy, crazy for loops with hundreds of iterations. We also added in rewards for anyone who stakes. And even with those two major new features, we still see massive gas reductions. Locks cost 20% less. Extending your lock, 34% less. Unlocking and claiming, 51% gas savings from using these contracts. And you get delegation for free, and it's really, really cheap. It's only 102,000 Gwei. And that's because, again, all you have to do is add two numbers, right? It's my voting power plus your voting power. That is the amount of voting power that you have. Super, super easy. So there are a couple quirks to be aware of. One is, again, it's an exponential curve. So it doesn't go to zero. There's always a little bit of residual voting power at the end. We decided that's OK. Like, it trends towards zero, but never quite gets there. We just have to live with that. The other thing, and this should be obvious, but you get exponentially more units the longer you stake for, right? So on Curve, you lock 100 tokens for 4 years, you get 100 VECRV. In our model, you lock up 100 OGV, and you'll get something like 1,000 VEOGV in return. And so it really skews the power to the people who are locking up for the longest time. But again, that's in line with our goals anyway, so we decided that's OK. And then the last thing here is because we're only changing your percent ownership of the voting power on when people stake or unstake, if no one is interacting with the contracts, things are just going to stay the same. And so this works best when you have a pretty active system with people staking and unstaking pretty regularly. You all know the magical formula behind Uniswap, right? The x times y equals k. Well, the formula for VEOGV is just as simple and just as magical. So you have a number of VEOGV that you get is equal to the number of OGV you have times this constant k raised to the power of y, where y is the end of your staking time. And so that number will always be getting bigger over time, right? So if you stake 100 OGV this week, and then I stake 100 OGV next week, I'm going to get more than you would this week, right? And so you can see different values here for K. If you want to get to Curve's model, you're probably best going around like 1.4, which would give you about a 4-year or about a 4x multiple on voting power. But you can choose your own adventure here as far as how aggressive you want to be with that constant. So if you want to check this out, it's 100% open source. Uses standard OpenZeppelin libraries. It's only 175 lines of code. It comes with MasterChef rewards distribution built in to that. It's been audited by OpenZeppelin, and this is live in production. There's real people using this, and it's securing tens of millions of dollars right now. This is the governance dashboard we have. We've been almost 80% of all OGV has been staked, so we're getting very high participation. Most of our stakers are coming back and restaking on a regular basis, and we're able to offer quite a high APY for the people. And again, it's coming from a rev share on the fees that are generated by OUSD. So you can check that out at governance.ousd.com. You can buy some OGV, stake it, play around with it, and see how it works in real life. And so that's it. I know I'm a little bit over time here. Shout out to Curve and very great work. We're only here. This is only possible because of those who've gone before, and we're truly standing on the shoulders of giants. So anyway, that's my talk. Great to see you all. Thanks so much.